Welcome everybody. My name is Robert and with me is
Peter.
It's lovely to have everyone here again on Bo Peak Talk. Thank you for the questions and comments on our podcast over the past few days. It's been really exciting and interesting to follow what's going on in Iran. But for today, we have absolutely no script in front of us. We're literally going to look at what's happening around the globe and possibly lead to some other conversation. Who knows where it will take us? I'll start with asking you, Peter, what's the past few days been like for you?
Well, for me, it's been pretty much when I'm not working, I come home and essentially, for a lack of a better way of saying, I'm babysitting kids, and I've got young children, so they do take up a lot of my time. But one of the things, look, me personally, I just been listening to a lot of podcasts myself in the last few days of other people presenting different topics and subjects. AI has been one of the things that I always tend to fall back on when I get bored.
Tell you what, I was using a bit of AI before we went on to air. I was for work and I was playing around with a few spreadsheets and I was importing some PDFs and asking it to make spreadsheets out of it and manipulating a bit of the data. Actually, you saw me do it in the afternoon, but I continued with other ideas as well and other spreadsheets I had. It's getting better and better. It's still a bit of a hit and miss. I can ask the same question 3 different times and get 3 different outcomes. Sometimes I even have to start a new chat. Now, that was me playing around with Google Gemini, but it is eye-opening. And a lot of the wizardry or skill set that people had in the past, I think it's going to no longer be the case. So you know how you have your office IT guru or whiz that goes around helping the so-called older staff with IT needs or skills they might not be having, such as spreadsheet skills. Pretty much you'll be able to put it all into the AI and you'll do all that wizardry. I'm
You
finding that
know,
more and more, Peter.
I think the same thing, but also I used to think that, even with the Google, I thought that, that would be a thing of the past because, you could essentially Google your answers
Mm,
and still you have people that I guess don't want to engage with that, and because they don't engage and obviously they're paid for a skill like to do work, um they're always going to ask someone to, I guess, do the AI search for them. Is there, for lack of a better way of explaining it? So you're always going to have that go-to person, or I guess a gopher, best way to describe it.
Yeah, what I'm actually looking up now, I'm really interested in the growth rate of your AIs. This will give you an idea. ChatGPT, it's reached in terms of what you said, in the sense that how, I guess, readily usable or the take up will be. Is that what you were trying to say, Peter?
Yeah, it's not so much the take up because that will grow like the same way that Google grew, and the internet grew, and take your go back and pick your like industrial revolution, things like that. So it's going to be taken up, but it's how willing at an individual level are they willing to actually engage with that
Yeah.
AI.
Oh, well, yeah, I understand what you're saying. They know it's there, they know how to use it, but they still will rely on others to do that groundwork. Sometimes it's frustrating, isn't it? When you feel like saying to people, just Google it. Why are you asking me this menial task?
Yeah, yeah, and even today it's even easier. You can you can ask the question to ChatGPT, and it will do the Google search and collate the answers for you really nicely, and still people don't engage.
You'll find this interesting. ChatGPT has reached 365 billion annual searches just 2 years after launch. This was noted on the 2nd of June 25. In comparison, Google took 11 years to reach the same volume. This makes, just one last point, Peter, this makes ChatGPT growth rate 5.5 times faster than Google's.
And that's not something that surprises me though.
Okay. All right.
Because you kind of got to think, we already have that exposure through the internet, right? And that's just another way of engaging it. For like at first, like I viewed Chat GPT and other AIs as kind of like a Google Search Plus, right? Obviously, they're evolving more, and some other ones are becoming more specialized. But that's my mindset that I've always had at the start. Now, obviously, that's evolved, and now I can see that they're capable of doing a lot more than that. But just looking at it from a Google search, I'm surprised that the like ChatGPT and other similar AIs haven't even grown even faster. Like
Okay.
I'm actually surprised of how slow it is, given how the take up of the internet is at the current state.
Yeah, that's a valid point. We also put in the mix that everyone has a device in their hand just about on the globe. Back then, when Google was finding its feet, not everyone had access to Google on a device. And I can remember going into a university lab to use Google to do searches. There were no phones. I had a computer. The computer barely got anything out of it. And if I had to do Google searches, I would go into the library at the university.
Yep, yep. Or a computer lab. I remember going into the computer lab to do searches that I needed to do as well, and that was quite a common thing. Now those computer labs probably have the same computers that I used when I was at university.
Yeah, no, that's been a really good start to today's episode looking at this because it's in our everyday lives. Let's face it, this technology use is going to have a major imprint in our economies and the way the world operates. So that's really a good way to start. It's going to keep being a disruption. It's going to continue to challenge the way we work and how we work. I'm really interested to see on another front because I have been thinking about it deeply whether it's going to make us more and more creative in the way we approach a task. Now, when I say that, and I said that with a little bit of reluctance, obviously it could be the AI itself doing the manufactured creative element. But in terms of how creative our initial planning and thoughts or presentation we can conjure up.
Well, the way I look at it now, this is going to be a bit of a loaded response, so I'll give you a good warning on that. I look at AI as it currently is at the moment, kind of um, like a program. Like, so think of a program, right? It does its set of tasks, and gives you a solution. So you define a problem, you create, and the program generally has a solution. What the AI is doing exactly the same thing as it is at the moment. But the thing is, the problem that's being fed in is continually changing. Like, it's never the same problem. You can have one person asking to show a picture of a Darth Vader that looks like a salami, for example, and the AI has to generate that or try its best to do
Yes.
what it's done, right? And then you might have another person looking to start writing a thesis on thermodynamics, for example, right? So it's being fed all these problems and pumping out solutions. So instead of it, I guess it's like a artificial general intelligence for programs, right? So it's still in the computing space.
Mhm.
Now, I guess where the creativity comes into is no longer for people where they decide what the steps are to come to the solution. The creativity is, what problem do I want to actually solve?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was thinking similar to you. I was thinking like if you have a spreadsheet and it has data, you can get really bogged down in days trying to think of ways to analyze that data. Now you'll be able to say, well, I want from this data X, but I also want Y. I also want Z. Oh, what about alpha, beta, gamma? There's so many ways of managing, manipulating, presenting that data. All you have to do is think about it now, prompt it into the AI. Well, it's not quite there perfectly yet, but it's getting more and more intuitive and easy to do, as you and I witnessed today when we were playing with it, where you could, you can actually inject data that could be a flat PDF for our listeners, a file that is not necessarily a spreadsheet file, and still read it in its image form, if you want to call it, PDF form, and do the work of converting it to a spreadsheet, and then you can say, well, now it's a spreadsheet. Can you do X, Y, and Z on it? And in this case here, we're trying to combine two different PDFs into one spreadsheet. Do you remember, Peter, when we're looking
Yes.
at it? So it's going to save time, and it's going to then give you more time to think, I believe, or you can, I guess in this example, dig deeper into the data.
And also another thing to add on that is even though the AI might not be able to give you, I guess, the answer that you want when you first ask the question, the way that it responds, it kind of feels like you're having a conversation where you're bouncing ideas off another person. So where you might fail in your first prompt, it will come back, and the way that it's formulated its response even there, it makes you think, okay, now how can I ask a better question to get the answer? So it kind of reminds me of almost like, I don't know if you've read it, but I'm sure you have, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where, they create a supercomputer, and the supercomputer gives the answer, right? And then the whole point is then to create a even better computer to actually ask the right question. So in this case, where the supercomputer is trying to ask the right question, where the AI already has the answers.
Yeah, and these are all sounding like positives, aren't they? But there is the other side, and it has been in the news, and there has been trends in this space. One example I found out there is concern about more and more patients turning to AI for therapy. That's an interesting trend or concern in recent times. And I always think of the book by Frank Herbert, obviously made into a films, because there are several books, June. The whole premise of that is a universe which features a past, humanity having fought against AI, resulting in, and that's why when you watch the films and also read the books, it results in a ban on thinking machines.
Yep, yep. And that's why they had the Mentats. They were the computational
Yeah.
species, I guess, that do, I guess, the brunt work of the computing. And I put that in air quotes there as I say that. I know no one can see it, but I'm air quoting that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've asked you that question before, Peter, and you seem to feel that. You correct me if I'm wrong here. You didn't see that Frank Herbert or science fiction fear reality or not yet?
I look more on the side of optimism, not because I confident that that's how it's going to be. Like the reality is, no one knows what will
Yeah,
happen in relation to it. Like so when it comes to, I guess, the speculation, then so it's like my flat answer is I have no idea.
yeah. None of us
But
do.
yeah, exactly, and no one does. But if I'm going to kind of think of the future and what can it be, I'm on the side of there is hope, and also there's great positivity on that side. Not and that doesn't discount the negative things that can possibly come from that as well.
I think that we've just found what we're going to talk about today, the future. And what
Yes.
is that future? Hope and future. Well, what is the hopeful future? Especially you, because you were mentioning at the beginning of the episode about playing with your children. I'm sure you look into your children's eyes. My children are older. They're men and women. They're adults now. But I certainly still look at them, and I worry about what that future is going to be. And when we talk about future, obviously some of the themes we talk about, and let's see if we can get to some of them at least, is climate and climate change. We've touched on AI, of course. Cost of living seems to come up a lot, and in terms of work, rest, and play, we've covered that in a previous topic or podcast. But when I say that, in terms of, and we've done this in previous podcasts, and it keeps rearing its ugly head in terms of how both in a family or in a relationship have to work full time to have a lot less. So, what's our future going to look like? We've covered that before, but why don't we look at, and we haven't looked at it straight off the bat, climate change? And what does that
Yes.
look like?
Yes, yes. It's a very contentious issue in today's society, and I'm sure we'll try tackle it in, I guess, the fairest way possible.
Well, I'm going to start with us in Australia here. We are a mineral-rich country. We're in the top 5, I would dare say, in the world. Obviously, you have your Brazils, your China, Russia, with their own mineral resources. I don't know, is China in that top 5? Certainly Russia is, of course. And then, yeah, is that up there?
Potentially, it's hard to pick because there's one when you look at what a country exports, and then there's another what the actual country has. And in terms of exporting, Australia is definitely
Yeah, up there,
in
up
the
there.
top of the world.
Yeah, it's certainly up there. The list includes, looking it up, Russia, US, Saudi Arabia, Canada, Brazil. I've actually been intrigued by in recent times, not realizing it, how mineral. I knew they were mineral rich, but I didn't realize they were higher up on that list than we are, being Canada. And did you know Canada also holds significant? Well, I always knew timber and oil, uranium.
Yeah, wow. Okay, I would not have picked uranium out of everything that they can possibly export.
Who's the number one? You think?
Number one, number one's probably Australia.
No, Russia.
Wow. Okay,
We're
there you
not in the
go.
top 5.
Is that in terms of exports or in like quantities of
Yeah, in terms of quantities, world's top 5 mineral rich countries.
yeah, yeah.
In terms of holding vast reserves of various minerals. That
Yeah.
includes
Oh, okay.
coal,
Yeah, yeah. In
gas.
that case, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Russia has
But we're
vast
up there.
quantities. Yeah.
We're up there. We're there. Yeah, when we say we, of course, we're Australian. Australia, China, Democratic Republic of Congo also possesses significant mineral wealth and plays a crucial role. Now, this all has to do with climate change, doesn't it? I said we're going to talk about climate change because I've got an interesting dilemma, and I'm interested in your views, Peter. I'll throw in my 2 bobs worth and then over to you. I was listening to recently a podcast, and it's done the TikTok rounds, and I wish I know the name of the person that said it, but it won't affect what I'm going to say. And he's very critical of us. I think he's American. He's very critical of us in Australia that we have all these minerals and resources, and we flat out refuse to use it because we want to go for alternate energy. And in saying that, and this is where the criticism lies, is that, but we're prepared to export it to other countries, like, for instance, the likes of China, who are going to use it tenfold compared to what we would use it, given our population is only in the realm of that banding of 20 to 30 million people. And his criticism is you have all these resources, you don't want to use them because you want to protect the environment, but you're prepared to export it, which is quite hypocritical. And I kind of agree with that bit. I struggle with that because you can't have it both ways in the sense that you really, really care about the environment. You want to meet this zero net emission, okay? But why are you exporting then if you really believe in what you're saying?
Yes, it's a hard argument to try and even counter on the other side. I guess one of the arguments that I guess you could counter with that is um, that it's I guess the duty of the world's first world nations to help developing nations get to a stage where we are right now, that we want to limit our carbon footprint. And that's really the only argument I can say. So that means that does mean, though, we do need to export cheaper energy sources so that way they can, lack of a better way of saying, catch up to the rest of the world.
Okay, you ready for it? The world's biggest polluters. You ready?
Yep.
Who are they?
China,
Yep,
Russia,
yep,
USA,
yes.
India.
Well done. And included in that, which is made up of obviously a collective group of countries, would be the European Union, of course, yes.
Yep, yep, yep.
Per capita emissions, the US and Russia have higher per capita emissions, meaning they emit more greenhouse gases per person compared to other countries. We don't even get a mention in Google Gemini in terms of top polluters. So are we sitting on the fence on this? Can we be centred on this in terms of Australia's approach to net zero emission. We do
Like I,
commit
like I
to.
said, I was even grasping at straws with the counter argument I gave you before.
Did you get a chance? If you get a chance, Peter, Joe Rogan talks to Bernie Sanders. It's a really good podcast. Just came out.
Oh, I might actually watch that one.
Yeah, and there is a bit about the environment, asking Sanders himself. He's two bobs worth. Obviously, he leans towards the left and is a socialist. And it's quite intriguing because Joe kind of challenges and says, look, it's not about whether I believe in climate change or not. And I kind of feel the same way as Joe on this one, in that it's beyond that. It's bigger than that. It is important, and that's what Joe's trying to say in terms of sustainable practices. It's about the fact we're polluting. It's about the impact we're having on the world's ecosystems. And Joe actually focuses on the oceans and the depletion of fish. And that's pretty scary, that. We were actually talking with one of our friends, weren't we, recently about that?
Yeah.
What's happening with that in mind? That when we talk about future, if this is what our podcast is about for our children and children's children, what is the number in terms of let's focus on fish for a moment. What is the percentage or number of fish by percentage that have been depleted?
Like in terms of fisheries,
Just fish in the ocean overall.
that's that would be. I would be surprised if any of the AIs can provide a decent answer to that
Well, let's try
because
to
it
get a
is.
percentage, okay?
Yeah,
I'll tell you what I've gotten. Approximately 34.2% of global fish stocks are overfished. Oh, okay.
that's overfished. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Nearly 90% of the world's fish stocks are at risk of depletion.
Yep. There you go. That actually sounds plausible in my mind when I consider how they do fishing.
The number of underfished stocks is declining, reaching historically low levels. Some regions like the Mediterranean and Black Sea have a higher percentage of unsustainable stocks than others. It's amazing that there still are fish in the Mediterranean. They love their
Yeah,
seafood, don't they? What do you mean by not many?
I mean, that's the joke that everyone always says in
Yes.
the areas.
Ah, yes, yes.
There are, but there's not many. It's nowhere near what it used to be.
To give you an idea, okay, now this is from the Geneva Environment Network, 12th of June 2025, so it's quite current. More than 820 million people depend on fisheries and aquaculture for food, nutrition and income. But the ability of these fisheries to provide jobs and nutrition is being threatened, I'm reading word for word, by an unprecedented crisis of overfishing and improper resource management. And here it is highlighted. Nearly 90% of global marine fish stocks are fully exploited, overexploited or depleted. What do you think of those numbers? The way that's said.
It's quite scary actually when you think about it.
A lot of those fish are never coming back.
Yeah.
Fish species.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to fish, because like you go for a walk along the beach and you'll come across a school of fish that's swimming in the waves, and you, if you were to count them, you'll probably count 300 fish in that school, and you think, oh yeah, there's plenty of fish, um, but one of the things that people don't consider is one dolphin. I think they eat like a ton of no, a few hundred kilos every day of fish. So it's over a ton a week of fish that they're eating. So when you look at what nature's doing just in itself to sustain itself, and then on top of that, humans, I guess, dragging everything that they come across, it's very hard, it's very easy to overwhelm that ecosystem.
Yeah, okay. I've heard this said on the similar vein. I haven't done a bit of driving around Western Sydney. There's a lot of work going on with the new airport, formerly known or often known or referenced as Badgery Creek, as you know.
Yep, yep.
I think they're now referencing it as Western Sydney International Nancy Bird Walton. It's under construction. It will be opening in 2026. It's a major airport for Australia and for Sydney in particular. But there are a lot of, I noticed driving around there, residential areas popping up. Habitat loss is a big one, isn't it?
Yes.
Talking about
Um,
koalas for a moment.
well, if yeah, for koalas, I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Appin, which is
Yeah, that's
in
right.
between, I guess in between Sydney and Wollongong,
Yeah,
people to get an idea. Um,
yes,
it's they house there the only one of the only chlamydia free koala colonies that's left. I think maybe the only one in New South Wales because chlamydia is a STI that travels through the koala
yeah.
population quite quickly and rapidly. So when you think that's the only one, and you know if you look up the issues that chlamydia can cause, one of them being infertility, it does make reproduction quite hard for the species. So it's quite scary that there's only kind of one healthy group left, if you think about it.
If you look at September the 24th, 2021, Earth.org, Australia lost a third of its koala population in just 3 years' time.
Would some of it come down to the fires that took place in late
Yeah, yeah.
2019?
They listed as land clearing from urban development, severe droughts, increasing bushfires.
Yeah, and you got to keep in mind though, we had unprecedented bushfires at the end of 2019. I don't know if you recall.
Mm. But the Yeah, but the problem with that is when we have these unprecedented bushfires, is that for koalas or a lot of animals, when you have a situation like that, is where they're going to go to flee or leave the bushfire. It's become a narrower corridor for these animals to escape the bushfire because of the habitat loss. So if a small specific area, like you mentioned, the Appin is a good example for these koalas, as they keep putting up, and they are putting up more and more residential suburbs. As they start popping up and building these up, the koalas, in this example we're giving, they don't have many places to flee or escape the fire.
Yeah, that's very true. And even just with simple farming, so while there
Yeah,
might not be houses that go up, but just if you're clearing the land to make room for a farm, whether that's for livestock or you're growing fruits or veg, um, you're still going to be destroying their habitat that they survive in.
I mean, we haven't even touched a lot of other countries. Look at what about Brazil as a good example with all the deforestation going on over there.
Yeah, yeah, and I would imagine the same thing that would be happening in Southeast Asia as well, where there's you know, quite a large amount of forest there as well.
September 11, 2024, 160,000 hectares of land burnt in the Amazon and 1.3 million hectares in the Pantanal region. How about that for some pretty big numbers?
Yeah, and that's quite a large chunk.
That burning is it's part of the annual fire season, which usually ends in October. But they also farmers and whatnot, they do a fair bit of burning as well, don't they? In Brazil, there's a bit of controversy about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if how many people know as well, depending on how remote you are as a farmer. So, if you're looking after livestock, for example, and naturally you're going to have livestock that passes away while they're in your care, they essentially get put into a big pile and they get lit on fire eventually. That's why farmers have those bonfires because it's getting rid of all that waste that they have from their farming activity that you know it's unfeasible to dispose of it by sending it elsewhere. It's the most feasible is to burn it and bring it back to the soil.
Sad, isn't it? When it's done so callously and no concern for the future. Of course, the science fiction film Blade Runner, if I'm correct, is where there's a set number of humans and these, what do they call them, replicas? I can't remember what they were called.
Replicants.
Yeah, replicants. And Noah on Earth and the other, because the planet had been raped and pillaged of, for better words, of its resources, people have moved to another planet, didn't they? They say in that film.
I
You know,
think they were exploiting other planets for the resources.
as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we don't have a way of doing that yet. We struggle to get out of the past the moon. We haven't even gone there as human beings.
Well, at this stage, we even struggle to reach the moon.
Yeah, It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I'm just looking it up in terms of Singapore, in terms of their blueprint, in terms of their sustainable approach. And it's a really interesting one. Yeah, it's a country that's a city. So it's doesn't have the stresses of countries with massive populations across large land mass, so to speak. But still, they've put a lot of work into zero waste in terms of waste management. They have that in place. Resource efficiency, a green economy, encouraging businesses to adopt greener practices, and public transport, which they do use a fair bit over there.
You know that one of the interesting things with Singapore is they incinerate
Mm,
all their waste. Like, so
mm,
they do have waste. They try to
yeah.
recycle and do the best that they can to reuse. So there's minimal waste, right? So that's step one. But whatever they can't is incinerated. Now, the interesting thing about that incineration process is step one, they use it to generate power for the city.
Mm.
So it doesn't obviously generate all the power, but it contributes to the power production. But secondly, they are also using that. They have a special island that they ship I guess, the soot that's generated from all that burning to an island where they're, I guess, creating an island from that waste, never to be used for people to use, but a place where people can go. I think at some point they're going to be opening it.
They also were using part of it to make some sort of like brick-like substances, weren't they? For build.
I can't remember now because I remember seeing it on a YouTube video
Yeah.
how they were utilizing it, and I thought that was such a good template for any city to use, not just if you're constricted with space. I think everywhere should be using similar fashions of dealing with waste as what they're doing. I think it's a really good template.
Sand and plastic to make bricks for construction. How about that?
Yeah.
Trash to electricity to bricks program that they have in place. So in 2019, researchers finding ways to turn trash into buildings. So they really are innovating in this space, leading the globe in this space. Isn't it interesting? Countries that are not necessarily mineral rich are so creative and are finding ways to continue to enhance and electrify, if that's the word to use, their economy, so to speak. That's what we need in Australia. We need those type of incentives. We've lost a lot of that initiative to be innovative.
Yeah, and it's more along the lines, I guess, with net zero, like we've mentioned before, it's more in lines of that. So if you're burning like rubbish or trash, that doesn't constitute net zero in a lot of people's minds. But that actually is more net zero than many of the other ways that people are dealing with their recycling and other waste management.
And what's our net zero? 2050? Is that the number that they throw around?
Yeah, I think it's 2050 through the Kyoto Protocol.
Oh, that's still been around. That's been around for quite a while, hasn't it? Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's have a look by when, because that seems a long way off. It's a very rather convenient idea, isn't it? Throw in a date like that, 2050. Yeah, 2050. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it got pushed. So obviously it's been something that's been in place for a while. So it was first adopted in 1997, obviously in Kyoto, Japan. Um, and then from there, other countries have entered into the agreement.
I found the actual spot where it was US energy expert Robert Bryce, that Australia
Hey,
is
he's got your
acting.
name.
Yes, is acting like an energy weakling despite being a global powerhouse in resources. And I found it really interesting, what he had to say. You're an energy superpower and yet you act like an energy weakling. I just don't get it. I'm repeating what I'm saying. You're pledging to zero out your emissions by 2050. That's next week in terms of planning purposes. You export 7 times more coal than you consume and you're blowing up your coal plants. He's right about that. It's not making sense. Look, if we decide and we say, look, we're not going to be using coal anymore, you don't then export it. That's hypocritical.
Well, how does net zero, how do you achieve that by offloading the carbon footprint? It's almost as if, say, if we made a cable which is long enough to, say, New Zealand, for argument's sake, or Papua New Guinea, because it's even closer, and if we sent all our coal over there to generate power, does that make us still net carbon zero because it's all being sent out in Papua New Guinea?
That's just it, isn't it? I mean, he goes on. I do want to read what else he says because it'll just make you more sick in the stomach. You have almost a third of the world's uranium here, and you won't build a reactor. You export 3 times more natural gas in the form of LNG than you consume, and yet you won't drill for it onshore. You're the Saudi Arabia of the Southern Hemisphere, he says. But imagine the Saudis have all this oil and they're not going to use it themselves. So we'll export it, but we don't want to use this terrible stuff ourselves. That's pretty much it. Let's repeat that. We'll export it, but we don't want to use this terrible stuff ourselves. It's hypocrisy in action.
Yeah, yeah. And especially, when it's been made clear we're the Saudi Arabia of the Southern Hemisphere, especially when it comes to gas, and we pay some of the highest rates in the world for our gas. And
Yeah,
right now we're
yeah.
being encouraged to not use gas and switch over to everything to electric.
Well, they turned yeah, that's right. They've turned that rhetoric higher, haven't they? To further include in this, which in the mix of this, talking about our future, and going back to cost of living. So climate change is connected to cost of living, whether people want to accept that or not. At the end of the day, it's going to affect people's hip pocket, and it does contribute to people's views and thoughts. By the way, and I do want to know our listeners know this, that what this fellow says, okay, Robert Bryce. I'm not a fan of nuclear plants, by the way. I'm not a fan. Unless they can really convince me and our listeners can respond to that in that it is 100% able to dispose of the chemical waste or nuclear waste, of course. I'm not a big fan of that, so I'm not saying we go that way, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. So I'm not moving towards the right in this entirely. But one area I'm concerned for our young children, power prices, Peter, they continue to skyrocket. When we have all this, we're actually sitting on all this coal, and we don't want to build coal plants, and we've privatized our electricity. It's
Well,
really making it difficult.
yeah, and you got to think about it as well in this way, right? We've got coal, we've got oil, we've got natural gas. So these are, I guess, cheapest forms of energy that the world has,
Mm.
because it's easily and readily extracted from the earth. And when I say easy, it's not easy. Like, it's hard work doing it, but it's easy with the technology that we have and people that are willing to do the work. Now, renewable energy doesn't compete when you compare the costs, right? So, the cost of generating renewable electricity, like, and let's say for argument's sake, we'll look at what's happening now, right? People have their solar panels on their roofs, and they're feeding in electricity during the day to the power providers, because most people are working, both parents are working at home, so there's no one at home. So that's feeding into the grid. So there's no one at home to even use, like other homes, to even use that power that's being generated at that time. So it gets shunted into, which we're trying to shunt that as best as we can into industry and places where it needs to go. But obviously it doesn't go. So then our power providers need to find ways of storing that electricity, which they probably can't. So they have to essentially dump it from the grid. So, and then when it comes to the nighttime, we have to rely on peaker power plants to generate the power that we're short for, because we're in excess by a large amount during the day. So And the catch is, even with peaker power plants, they generate more, I guess, pollutants than your baseload power plants. So and peaker power plants generally run on oil, some run on gas, but they're worse for the environment than your baseload power plants.
So we're going to have all these cars that are electric. At night, they need charging after someone's worked in the garage. So if everyone in every street had an electric car, no longer petrol cars, where's the electricity going to come from?
Well, we wouldn't have enough. The only way that it can ever work is if every single house had their own battery pack
Yeah,
with their own solar
yeah.
panels so they can store, and
Okay.
then I guess that's grid supplied, because I don't think if we have to pay for the power and a grid connection, that we should be supplying um I guess the infrastructure. But if it's on everyone's premise, then they can feed in based on what the power needs are for the area. But that will never happen, because then the power companies need to provide payment to the landowners, because they're using their land to house power infrastructure. It becomes such a red tape situation that the whole concept of renewables just gets blown out the window. Now, that's the reason why power prices go up, though, is because we can't, like, we're not using our cheapest form, we're using our most expensive, and the government is pulling back subsidies all the time when it comes to that. So the prices are just going to keep bouncing up when it comes to power prices.
Because I thought it was an election issue enough where we would have seen some traction, but it's pretty much now a defeatist concept of just expect power prices to continue to go up more and more.
Well, and the thing is that's unavoidable, because we have binding targets that we've signed. I'm not sure if it's in the Paris one, or the Kyoto Protocol, which but we're bound to hit a certain target by a period. So it's going to be forced on us one way or another. Whether it's going to be a super tax, whether it's going to be, yeah, power prices going up, which is essentially a tax anyways, because if you artificially inflate it, it still counts as a tax. So one way or another, our usage needs to be reduced. And that's part of the reason why even houses cost so much to build these days, because it's not like, while your trades have gone up in value in terms of what you need to pay them, like for labor, and materials have gone up, they haven't gone that much up to warrant what's being charged today. But when you look at I guess, the quality of the builds that need to be produced, the standard has gone higher in terms of energy efficiency for the home. So that means there's more investment into materials into the homes. And that's what a lot of people don't realize that's happened over the last few years here in Australia.
It's not a very good picture, is it?
No, no. And, when you look at it more and more, everything's going to be based around what a household is consuming. I wouldn't be surprised if we get given rations for how much power we can use per day.
In looking at this, I stumbled to something on a bit of a tangent here. Over the 10 years to 2023, 2024, nurses paid $7 billion more in tax than did the oil and gas companies in Australia.
Have a look if this actually will give you the honest answer. Have a look at the interest paid for student help debts, or HEX debts, depending on how you want to label it, in comparison to what the oil and gas companies paid. So
Okay.
now keep in mind,
Uh,
there is a small interest rate of like 1%, and that gets adjusted based on CPI. So have a look at how much students paid based on that CPI increase compared to the oil and gas companies.
so we're going to put how much students pay in debt
Yeah.
in Australia versus oil and gas companies. You ready for it? Isn't it wonderful, this on tap information we can get? All right, here we go. This is Australian Institute here. It must be the Bible. Australian Institute research that matters. In 2023, tax from the PRRT was less than a quarter the amount raised by HEX. That doesn't help us, does it?
Yeah, no, 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 it does. because they paid less than a quarter than what was that the monies that was
Yeah.
raised from the HEC student.
Wow. Pretty sad plight, isn't it?
It's pretty sad when you look at maybe 2, 3 generations ago, tertiary education was free,
Was free.
and
Was
now
free.
where we've put our children to be paying more in inflationary adjustments on their debts than what industries are paying.
All right, you ready for it? The average HEX debt of young people in Australia. You ready for the number? What about future? The average HEX debt was 27,640 in the
Yeah, I would have guessed 30 off the
2023-24.
top of my head.
This is up from 26,494 in 22-23. The Australian Institute again says that Australians in their 20s have HEX help debts more than 10,000 greater in real time than did people 20 years ago. Almost 57,000 Australians have a student debt of more than $100,000.
Yeah.
Now, that's a big number, isn't it? When you consider, imagine starting off with that kind of debt. But it's funny because when I was studying many, many, many years ago, we didn't get around with horse and carriage, so it wasn't that long ago, but over 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I remember there was a particular student friend of mine, he was from Sweden, and he was telling me back then how they just wear a massive student debt. Well, they don't worry about owning a house, see? They don't worry about having a home loan. To them, in their culture, is to have a student debt. That's how they look at it. So it's interesting, isn't it, when we're looking at this? We're going all over the place in a way, but to connect it all back, climate change has massive, our approach to it or our plan to address climate change, it has a massive, massive impact on our cost of living. And unfortunately, we're relying on good government to come up with innovative ways of solving this big problem, which is our hunger for energy and power. When you think about it, our transport system in Australia really doesn't help entirely the burden of so many people that are in a car on their own off to work. Carpooling, although encouraged, maybe isn't encouraged enough. But not only that, in many parts of Australia, having a vast, big landmass, there hasn't been many innovations to improving the train system to make it more not only readily available but more lucrative, I guess, to be travelling around. So if you look at from Newcastle to Sydney or Wollongong to Sydney, that train system is quite old and still very slow to get around, whilst we look at China with their amazing train systems over there. They can get from a same distance, Sydney to Melbourne, on some of their bullet trains, I think in a matter of 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, that sounds about right based on the speeds that they can do. Yeah.
Yeah, so really, and that would make it attractive rather than getting on a big plane, commercial airline plane. And when you think about it, if you live in Newcastle and you want to hop on a plane to Melbourne, if you decide to go to Sydney Airport, you're going to drive there, which is crazy, isn't it? And that's a good 2 hour, 2.5 hour drive, if not more, to Sydney Airport. And then you're going to get on a plane for 1 hour, 1.5 hours, once you eventually get on the plane, to get to Melbourne. Something doesn't add up. It should be a case where you could hop onto a bullet train, you'd think. And there has been discussion about bullet trains in the past. And all of this is addressing climate change because it's meaning more of us are sharing the resource of public transport rather than still relying so much on cars at the moment. Unfortunately, that's part and parcel of the issue that we have. And I don't see any of our politicians really addressing changing that in a dramatic way.
Yeah, and kind of what makes it even hard is, and it's going to get harder and harder. We touched on I guess, urban sprawl of Sydney, cities like Wollongong, Newcastle. You got new suburbs coming up, gobbling empty space. Once you've got houses in the way, it's a lot harder to build infrastructure after the fact. It's something that needs to be in place sooner rather than later. But it seems like everything's pointing towards later when it comes to I guess, the direction of our politicians.
Part of the problem is our politicians live on a 3-year cycle, and this is part of this future we're talking about, and they don't have those long-term visions that we need as a nation or nation building. And that would be a trend or an issue not just immune to Australia, but across the globe, where you do have these politicians that are living for their next. They're
Y-
not
You know,
really.
one of the things that I've always wanted to say in a place where it can be heard. So this is a long-standing thought I've always had, especially, and you've kind of raised it just now, that politicians, when running for government, should have, by minimum, one long-term plan as a policy, which, if they're elected, is a legally binding
Yeah.
um, policy that they have to try and enforce or pass. Naturally, the way that laws are passed in Australia, and I'm sure other countries, there are two houses, so it needs to pass two houses. But when it's legally binding, at least the government's going to do the best that they can to have that law passed. And if it's proven that they haven't, they can potentially go to jail for not living up to, um, their election promises. See, if you have that level of, how can I say, encouragement for our politicians, I'm sure you'll see things like this come up where infrastructure will be built. And or at least planned for in a much better and meaningful way.
Yeah, I like that idea, but you know what I fear about your idea, Peter, is that they'll have this long-term plan, they put it out there, but they really don't care if it gets through.
Yes, but see, that's the always what I think, because you can always say, oh, the Senate can reject it, right? And because they can, they will, and that's that squashed. But the government is formed like in the lower house, but they're all formed within a party. So then if the party is held accountable for the lack of that passing, they can then be charged, prosecuted to that extent of, how on how they failed, I guess, their constituents that they're representing.
Interesting model. Interesting model indeed. We do need to look at it in a way where we are trying to encourage long-term, big picture ideas. Looking at the good old USA, there's not much going on there in terms of big picture. Though while everything's about make America great, but I don't see too many. Are you seeing too many changes?
No, the biggest change is with the whole Doge um
Oh yeah, you're
thing that
right.
they
I'll
put in,
take that back.
right? Yeah, but you got to
Yeah.
remember so they're removing inefficiency from the
Mm.
government, right? And that's fine. Now, can that also be masked as removing roadblocks to goals that individuals might have or have been influenced to remove, so that way roadblocks are removed? So a good example might be, for argument's sake, if someone wanted to release, driverless cars in the US, and if they cripple the National Highway Department, whatever they call it in the US, that will be a good way of kind of hiding that through the Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah.
And that's the scary thing about stuff like that. When you're there to cut funding, what are you really cutting? And how does the layman know, is it actually beneficial or is it meeting someone else's agenda?
Well, having Elon Musk in that position, do the other side do see it as agenderized in a way? It doesn't sit well.
Yeah, but how can he prove that? Because he owns Tesla, he owns
Exactly.
SpaceX. He's a multi-billionaire that can benefit from departments being crippled in the future.
The government contracts that will then go his way.
Exactly, exactly. Especially, and it's not now. It's for the future.
And the other big change in the US has been, of course, the whole we've spoken about it, the migrant solution with ICE. But I guess, and we haven't spoken about it too much, but in terms of future, looks like we have a ceasefire holding on at the moment between Israel and Iran. And we had our first official on possibly camera, president of America swearing and using the F word. Yeah, did you hear about that one?
I did hear about that one.
Yeah,
That made my day, because it just shows that, while they are distinguished people, or try or put make themselves out to be distinguished people, they are human at the end of the day. So it was a nice thing to
I
see
don't
someone do.
know. I see it as a possibility. Could be it could go and become etched in history as a breaking point. It was almost like he was trying to send deliberately a message. No, I'm not going to tolerate you guys hurling stones still over the fence
Yeah, yeah.
with each other. We decided to ceasefire now, and he pretty much called them stupid. He pretty much did the way he worded it, in the sense that, and then obviously the F bomb was dropped. So maybe in history they might, in terms of a play on words here, they might look at peace in the Middle East because of the bomb that was dropped, the F bomb that was
Yeah.
dropped, because it did put a stop for now anyway to the continual tick for tack that was going on. But we don't know if he was. I've heard it being said that they had 20 hours or whatever it be before the ceasefire officially started, and they both wanted to just look good in front of. Because there is a lot of this. I want to have save face in front of my people, so to speak. Obviously, for the Iranian regime, they don't want any discontent or any whispers of discontent. And we know Benjamin Netanyahu, he certainly has his own opposition and he has his own other issues or agendas he has to worry about based on what's going on in the Gaza. And this has become a convenient distraction. Someone could criticise. I'm not saying, well, let's give him the benefit of the doubt that he hasn't gone and done this and put the world on edge as a convenient distraction.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see once, I guess, some of the dust settles, if you're right, if it hasn't been a distraction for something else happening in the.
It's a very precarious position. Very precarious position indeed that we sit at. Now, of course, we're going to hear from Americans that they certainly were, well, with Trump in power, you're going to get that, how 100% effective they were in stopping the whole nuclear program. It'll be interesting to see if it rears its ugly head again, the nuclear program in Iran.
From my understanding is the bombing that America took place in Iran. They took back the Iranian nuclear program a few months. That's what I heard.
Yes, that's what I'm hearing now. You know what I'm finding also interesting in all of this, in terms of the future for our children, is the amount of misinformation on social media is out of control. I don't know if you're noticing this, Peter, but a lot of the fake videos, fake
Yeah.
news sources is is absolutely out of control. It's actually validating the need for mainstream media.
Yeah, but see, the way I even look at it is, if, say, for example, I'm hearing like something that's completely fake from X, whatever, and I don't mean X as in the social media X, I just mean X as in the
Yeah,
variable X.
yeah, yes, yes.
That means I can't trust any source of media, because if one source is biased, they all are biased.
Yeah, true, but I'm looking at it in terms of there is a level of possible decency that comes out when you hear, even, let's look at media sources in America where they're poles apart, CNN and Fox News, in terms of their presentation of the facts. Obviously, Fox News will present Trump as being the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, yeah.
CNN are going to present him as the Antichrist, okay? And we know what we're going to get from mainstream media. But I noticed and this is what I'm trying to home in on this point, the amount of misinformation on TikTok, YouTube, out there as video sources. I mean, there were videos. Have you seen those AI videos now that are coming out where it's showing, whether it be in Tehran or Tel Aviv, the bombings that are going on? And sometimes you ask yourself, and sometimes it is the case, it's AI made the videos.
Yeah, I think a lot of those actually were AI made. I don't think I actually saw any legitimate video from either side
Mm.
during the whole, I guess, period. That's my view on that. I think everything that we saw was in one form or of another and another generated and presented to us as something that's happened, and I have no idea what was real and what wasn't.
I guess it hasn't changed. You know, there are people out there that believe the moon landing was fake.
Yeah, yeah, and they still do, and even when our spaceships orbit the moon, and
Yeah.
and they take photos of where the like sites landed, you can still see the tracks and everything, and they still believe it. Like, there's one thing when like you've been shown enough evidence, and I mean, with the moon landing, that's something we can safely say the evidence has shown that it took place based on what's been presented to us.
Can we? Can we?
Of course, there's always that level of doubt because because without you being there yourself, you can
Yeah.
never give 100% certainty. But the odds of that being fake are quite low. That doesn't mean that I'm correct in saying that it's not fake,
Yeah.
but the odds are quite low.
No, what are you talking about? They had, what is it, hundreds of people working for NASA, and every one of them signed a contract to lie.
Yeah, and not one person went against that contract. How many whistleblowers do you hear from Nortel networks and take your pick when something happens? The fact that even WikiLeaks, the guy from WikiLeaks was even allowed to live after everything that he did. Yeah, but no one from NASA spoke.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's a really big area of discussion. I don't know where. You know what? If you ask me, do I think? Do you want to ask me? Do you want to ask me what I think about the moon landing?
Yeah, look, seeing as we've gone onto that topic, please.
I'm 50-50. I really am 50-50. Whether it happens or not.
And all right, so we know obviously based on the narrative that we know of in terms of the moon landings on why you believe that we went there. What's making you doubt that we haven't?
I just think with everything, I look at the fact that historically, at that point in time, there was a lot of pressure on America to get there.
Yeah.
Struggle. The bit that gets me to that 50%, if you want to call it, is where's all that technology gone? Why? Why? I mean, they even said that they lost a lot of that technology, and then there's even tales of they lost a lot of the recordings. NASA, that is.
What I'll say though, uh, is with the technology side, and I think though um you kind of gave me what I'm going to say with your first response. There was a lot of pressure to go there. So now think about it in your personal self, right? So let's just say, for argument's sake, you're 200 kilos, right? And in your heart of hearts that, being 200 kilos is not healthy for your height and body shape, right? So, you really put hard effort into, making sure that, you do the right thing, eat the right foods, do exercise, and you lose a whole bunch of weight, right? So you get to a normal weight. Let's say your normal weight's 100 kilos. So you lost half of your body weight, and, you got there. The interesting thing is, right, you'll probably put some weight back on. You'll never get to 200 kilos again, but you'll put some weight back on, right? And then once you get to that comfortable weight, you're going to lose the ability to be able to lose that weight again, right? And the main driver for why you lose that is because you know that you're not as bad as what you used to be. right? So you used to be 200 kilos, but now you're only 130, let's say, for argument's sake, and that's not that bad, right? So it's like, okay, I'm gonna stay. Your mind subconsciously ends up telling you, this is where I'm gonna stay. I don't have the willpower to diet, exercise, and get to that stage where I was, at 100 kilos. So you've
Why?
lost that ability.
So what? Every country out there, America especially, they've lost all this technology. Completely lost this technology.
Yeah,
And
I don't say they've lost the technology. I say they've lost the drive or the will to actually go
why
back.
is it another nation? It's a great place to make a statement.
Yeah. It's not very easy to get there.
I'm starting to go 60% on this.
It's not easy to get there. One of the interesting things
Yeah, that's right.
as well. So naturally, since we've been shooting things up into space, that we have a lot of debris there as well. So just getting out of orb, like the influence of Earth's gravity, is a accomplishment in itself these days.
Mm,
It's actually scary to the point where if we continue to do what we do in lower Earth orbit,
yeah,
we might essentially make it so we can never escape Earth again.
yeah. And then there'll be a little screw that stops a rocket reaching Mars
Yeah,
because it was
yeah,
orbiting the Earth.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation, and it doesn't help that when NASA says something like, "We've lost the ability to do it, lost the technology, lost video footage." Okay, I'm repeating the same things again, just trying to
Yeah,
summarize it. Of course, there's the ones with the flag wasn't flapping and all that other stuff. That stuff there, I think, can scientifically be proven to be inaccurate. There are ways of proving that, but it's an interesting conversation. It can polarize people. It certainly can polarize people. Maybe Stan Kubrick, wasn't it? Claimed to have made the film.
yeah. He's the one that made the film 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah. Hey, here's one for you. You know they live streamed it, yeah?
Yeah.
You know when they live stream it, how do they do it?
Well, from how I understood was,
Okay, okay.
well, the signal naturally had to be transmitted from where they were back to Earth. So there was a 1-2 second delay in everything, in every communication that took place.
Do you like the where Nixon is talking to them on the phone? Have you
Yeah, but
seen
did,
that
did
photo?
yeah, but did they edit out the delays though?
He was having a conversation with them.
Yeah, but was that a real-time conversation, or was that a
We
conversation
don't
where?
know whether that was staged for the purpose of us. But I wanted to get to the point, you know what they did? They actually I think they projected it onto screens and then the TV channels filmed what was projected on the screen. Did you know that?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So does that make it more sus?
Well, I haven't seen those broadcasts, because if you see communication where, for example, from Earth, you're speaking instantly to someone in on the moon, and then the response comes straight away, like you're on a phone here on Earth. Um, then I'd say it's sus, because I don't know if you remember calling Europe from Australia when you're a lot younger. There always used to be a slight delay, even though like you can have a real time conversation. It was slightly more than what you'd get from calling someone down the road.
Yeah, I don't know. Very interesting, isn't it? It's very,
Yeah.
very interesting. It's a good conversation. I find it really interesting. It's amazing what human beings can accomplish. I am going back to 40, 60, I think.
40, 60, if like, or for like 60% that they made it there,
Yes, this
or
is it. I
yeah,
I just think it like we said initially, there was a lot of people being in on this hoax, if you want to call it. That makes it difficult to digest in a way.
yeah, and the
All
th-
these.
and that that's one of the main things. Like whenever I start doubting it, uh,
Mm,
like you know how you can kind of get yourself in a spiral and you go nah, and especially when you see some of like some YouTube video or something where they
yeah,
try
that's
and
right.
disprove it, And they really give you compelling evidence. It's like, oh,
Oh
look at
yeah, they
this.
can be convincing. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, yeah, but see, for me, it always comes back to, okay, that's great. Like it's all everything's correct that you said in the video. Let's just assume
Yeah,
that. But then that means that out of the thousands of people involved, not one of them decided to break their silence and speak the truth. Not one.
yeah. That's where it gets a bit hard to believe. But the Earth is flat, Peter.
You know what I really, really enjoy about that conversation? I agree because it's flat where I'm standing.
Okay, we're supposed to be upside down, aren't we? Why aren't we upside down?
Yeah, we are. That's why we talk backwards.
That explains.
Did you know if you play back this video in the northern hemisphere, it's played back backwards?
Oh, is that what happens? Wow, there we go. We're upside down. Hey, our toilets spin the other way. Did you know that when you flush?
Yeah, that is. I think I don't know if it's actually been proven, but yeah, the Coriolis effect makes it spin.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's the same thing as why our so when we get hurricanes here, they
Mm.
spin clockwise, and I think in the northern hemisphere they spin counterclockwise.
You're looking it up because I'm looking it up. I want to know. I should know. I have a geoscience degree. In Australia, they clockwise. Yep, yep. And it's the good old Coriolis effect.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's mainly one because the way that the Earth's
yeah.
spinning.
Yeah, that's right. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, I'm always been worried that if I jump high enough, I might fall off the earth because we're
No,
upside down.
that only happens if you're really special.
Okay, is that what happened? People disappear. But yeah, it's been a great talk, and we've gone away from the future. We've gone to the past, I guess, in many ways. But I've enjoyed today because remember, to our listeners, we're just two guys chewing the fat, looking at what's going on in the news. In fact, in terms of what's going on in the news at the moment, what has been going on as we speak right now? As we speak right now, what is the major headline? I always love what's going to happen with what's going to come out of Trump's mouth. What do you reckon?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I was just reading articles in relation to US Trump, US President Trump saying that Putin may have ambitions beyond Ukraine.
He's up and down like a yo-yo, isn't he?
Yeah,
His mate Putin isn't his friend anymore. Things are going the other way, maybe for him.
yeah. Well,
It's not.
I think
It's not easy, is it? I mean, at the end of the day, it's not easy all of this because if you're Trump, or any leader you are, it's like life in general. Who do you trust? You know, when you're dealing with leaders and diplomats, they're going to tell you one thing and maybe do the other. That's why I reckon he cursed the other day because they had verbally agreed as a ceasefire, and he must have been thinking, "What now? Why we agreed? What are you doing now?"
yeah, and you know, it's funny that you said that. Like going back on the more philosophical,
Mm.
you said who do you trust you know, and I'm thinking about it, and you know, I've got young kids, you've got kids that are older, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my level of thinking. You know, I would like to think that that I would teach my kids that within the family unit, especially, be open and honest. All right. Um, and and that makes sense. You know, you want to be open and honest with your family, it opens up communication, etc., etc. But then I think outside of that circle of the family, do I want to teach my kids to be open and honest with everyone outside our family unit, or is that the best approach, or is it worthwhile holding things back?
Being cunning, yeah, being cunning as
Yes.
well. Yeah, that's a
Right.
really
And then
good conversation.
that's a topic in itself. Now,
Yeah.
see, and what makes that even interesting, if I'm willing to teach my kids that, right, and I
Mm.
haven't done it yet, but if I'm thinking about what's the best approach to that, who's to say that other people haven't already done that? So then why should I trust anyone other than my family unit?
Interesting. Yeah, it's a really difficult one, and relationships in the workplace and who to trust in the workplace.
Yeah.
There is a saying in terms of when you have a good goal that you are excited about, you should keep it to yourself. Is that related or connected to what we're talking about in a way?
Yeah, and also they say that goal should be kept towards yourself,
Mm,
sorry, is because the moment you start sharing that goal to others is where you lose the motivation that you have yourself to reach that goal.
yeah,
Yes.
it's hard raising children, and what's the best way? Because you don't want your children to be gullible, naive, and expect everyone to be as kind-hearted as what you want your children to be, and then be stepped over and struggle in life.
Yeah, but more importantly, if you taught your children that way, isn't that setting them up for a failure as well?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You worry about then they go out there and they're eaten alive, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not easy, and you can see it at a global scale what politicians at a foreign level are dealing with every day.
Yeah, and see now to I guess to bring it back to Putin and Trump, who do you trust more out of either of them? You know, as far as I'm concerned, they're both as trustworthy as each other. And by that I mean you can trust them or not trust them, it makes no difference. They're the same. And then to expand that even further, pick any world leader, they have the same level of trust, that you would trust any other leader.
It's not easy. Hey, here's one for you. Talking about rockets. India celebrate first international space mission gets underway.
Where
Yeah,
what was mission?
astronaut Shubhanashu Shukla reaches space station. Dragon capsule docks. India, Poland, and Hungary crew arrive at space station. India sends its first astronaut into space in 41 years. How about that for a good news story?
That is a good news story, and it's good to see India re-entering the race, or
Yeah.
not that it's a race at this point but re-entering, I guess, um, the global space industry.
On a more important note, Chief Jeff Bezos and Lawrence Sanchez are tying the knot this week.
What marriage is that for,
That's
Mr.
the Amazon, obviously. We'll call him Tycoon and Lawrence Sanchez. That should be the front and center news. He's getting remarried.
That's
Jeff
if
Bezos.
that's if Jeff Bezos has owned a news outlet.
Yeah. All right. By the way, for our listeners, I'm actually joking there when I'm saying this. By the way, don't think I'm being serious about that one at all, because that's to be quite honest, I don't know how that makes the news, but it has. Now they're questioning what's your views, Peter? They are questioning that Iran strike. Whether it did completely damage the three sites we spoke about in our emergency podcast.
Uh,
Did you know about that? That they're questioning it?
I heard of it, but it's not something I found anything really definitive on.
And you said that they're months away. They can be back to where they were.
Yeah, that's the last I heard in relation to what was coming out of like the American agencies.
And how does it work when I read a headline from today? Australia to deploy 100 soldiers to help Ukraine in its bloody war against Russian aggression.
So we're deploying 100 soldiers.
Yeah, what a
Oh,
difference
that's it.
that's
You
going to
that's
make.
it. The war in Ukraine's
He's
tide's
over.
going to turn. Yeah, it's over. That's
It's
it.
over.
Australia's going.
What's the point of that? What do we get out of doing that? I don't get it. Is it more of a just a cosmetic look good? We're on your side. Because after all, we're gullible and naive to the cause at times, aren't we? I mean, we went off to Iraq. Many people, although there was a positive spin out of it, although it was an absolute tragedy. The Anzac War, our Anzacs going off there. The Brits were, how does the story go? The Brits were offshore and they sent our soldiers to the wrong beach. But it did create the Anzac spirit, didn't it? in many ways. It is entrenched in our very fabric and identity, how bravely our soldiers fought. We can never, ever dispute that one in many ways. If anyone hasn't done it, can I encourage people? That's a good one for your young children, Peter. The Anzac ceremony. It is a beauty. The Anzac Dawn ceremony. It's very
Yeah,
emotional and
when
moving.
they come of age, definitely it'll be something that I'll be encouraging. Maybe not every year going to the actual services, but getting up early and doing something in the spirit of it.
My son was involved in doing that with the band, the brass band and that, when he was younger, and I actually enjoyed it when he went off on some of those marches that occur on the day. So it's a beautiful occasion. In fact, my grandfather, remember Italian migrant, he used to go every year to it. He understood the value of people that served our country, and in saying that, particularly if you consider that all countries in some form, being an Italian migrant. I remember one of the things I noticed when I was in Italy visiting where my grandfather grew up was, of course, the war memorial sites over there from the Second World War that they have. It is a part of many countries' history. Yeah. It's been a big week in the news. I've enjoyed this conversation today, off the cuff. My name is Robert, and with me is...
Peter.
We look forward to talking next podcast. We might have to look further at that idea. What were we saying? Future of we looked at future of children, but you mentioned some that you want to look at next time.
We will probably have to play it back because I can't think of it at the top.
I put you on the spot. I love it that because I forgot it completely. But there was something there. You said they'll make a good podcast. I remember you said that.
You know what? I think what we should probably do one episode is listen back to all our podcasts where we said this is a good episode and actually pick one and make an episode on it.
It's going to be great. Well, for now, everyone, keep sending us your messages and even suggest a possible episode you'd like us to focus in on. But for now, bye.